What happens when a Hollywood icon walks onto a live morning talk show and refuses to stay quiet about what he believes is fake outrage in modern media? Make sure to subscribe to Fame After Hours and like and comment for more talk show coverage. The studio lights are already bright, almost too bright, washing over the glossy set of the morning talk show. The audience is packed, restless, phones already in hands even before the segment fully kicks off. The energy feels like something is about to happen, not just another celebrity promotion interview. Matthew McConaughey sits across on the panel, calm posture, slight lean back in his chair, but his eyes are alert in a way that suggests he's already listening more than speaking. Host one smiles warmly, try and set the tone. So, Matthew, you've been speaking a lot lately about authenticity, about Hollywood, and about what you call overreaction culture. Some people say you're criticizing the industry. Would you say that's fair? McConaughey nods slowly, takes a breath. I don't know if I call it criticism, he replies evenly. I call it observation. I think we're in a time where everything is immediate. Reaction is instant, but understanding takes time. And we're skipping that second part a lot. A few audience members clap lightly, but the reaction is mixed. One or two people nod. Others remain silent, watching carefully. Host 2 leans forward, slightly skeptical. But Matthew, when you say that, it sounds like you're dismissing people's emotional responses. A lot of those reactions come from real experiences. Don't you think calling it overreaction culture might sound insensitive? McConaughey doesn't rush his answer. He looks at the table for a second, then back up. I hear that, he says calmly. But I think there's a difference between emotion and conclusion. Emotion is valid, but not every emotional moment should become a final judgment. The audience react again. Some clapping, some murmurs, a few shifting in seats. Host 3 jumps in quickly, tone sharper now. So you're saying people are too emotional to understand their own issues properly? That question tightens the atmosphere. A brief silence follows. McConaughey exhales, not annoyed, but clearly more focused now. No, he says firmly. I'm saying all of us, me included, can feel something strongly in a moment and still need time to understand it fully. That's not an insult. That's human nature. A few claps break out, but the tension doesn't fully ease. Host 1 tries to soften it with a smile. Okay, but let's bring it to Hollywood specifically. You've said there's too much performance and not enough honesty. That's a pretty strong statement coming from someone still active in the industry. McConaughey nods without hesitation. It is strong, he admits, but I think honesty should be strong. If everything is polished all the time, then nothing feels real anymore. Host 2 raises an eyebrow. But isn't Hollywood built on performance? That's literally the job. McConaughey leans slightly forward now, more engaged. Performance is the job. Yes, but living performatively all the time, that's different. There's a point where people stop being themselves even off camera. The audience reacts louder this time. Some applause, some audible agreement. Host 3 crosses her arms slightly. But you're part of that system. So aren't you also participating in what you're criticizing? A sharper moment. The room feels tighter again. McConaughey looks directly at her now. Yes, he says simply, and I think accountability starts there. If I can't talk about it because I'm inside it, then nobody inside anything can ever speak. A noticeable reaction spreads through the audience. Some applause, a few oohs, some surprised laughter. Host 1 quickly steps in, trying to control the pacing. Okay, let's not turn this into a debate battle. We still want to talk about your upcoming project too. McConaughey gives a slight smile, but it doesn't fully relax the tension. We can talk about it, he says, but I think people are more interested in real conversations than promotional ones today. That line lands heavier than expected. The audience responds again, louder clapping now, mixed with uneasy chuckles. Host 2 looks directly at him. So are you saying talk shows aren't real conversations? McConaughey pauses just a beat longer than comfortable. I'm saying sometimes we forget they're supposed to be. The studio doesn't fully know how to respond. Some applause, some silence. Cameras still rolling. Energy now fully shifted from casual interview to live tension unfolding in real time. Host 1 lets out a short laugh. trying to ease a tension that has slowly built over the last few minutes. Well, this is definitely becoming a more interesting conversation than we expected this morning. The audience laughs lightly, but everyone can feel that the discussion has moved beyond a routine celebrity interview. McConaughey smiles politely. I think interesting conversations are usually the ones where people disagree. Host 2 immediately responds. Disagreeing is one thing, but some would say your comments encourage people to question experiences they haven't lived themselves. McConaughey nods. I understand that concern, but questioning isn't the same thing as dismissing. We've reached a place where asking a question is sometimes treated as an attack. A few audience members clap. Host 3 quickly jumps in. But Matthew, there are reasons people react strongly. Many groups have spent years trying to get their voices heard. When someone says we're overreacting, it can sound like you're minimizing that effort. McConaughey shakes his head. Then let me be clear. I'm not talking about people fighting to be heard. I'm talking about a culture that sometimes rewards outrage more than understanding. The audience immediately reacts. Some clap, some remain silent. A few exchange glances. Host 2 leans closer. But who decides what's outrage and what's justified concern? Good question, McConaughey replies. I don't think any one person decides. That's exactly my point. We should be having conversations instead of declaring verdicts within 30 seconds. The crowd applauds louder than before. Host 1 notices the audience reaction and shifts in her chair. But isn't that idealistic? Social media moves fast. News moves fast. Public opinion moves fast. Exactly, McConaughey says, and that's why mistakes happen fast too. The audience lets out a collective murmur. Host 3 looks unconvinced. So what's the solution? Listening. The answer comes instantly. Actually listening. Host 3 shakes her head slightly. That sounds nice, but it's easy to say. Everyone claims they're listening. McConaughey nods. True, but listening means being willing to hear something you don't like. That statement earns one of the loudest rounds of applause so far. Host 2 waits for the audience to settle. Let's be honest. A lot of criticism you receive comes from people who believe you're speaking from a position of privilege. The room suddenly gets quieter. McConaughey's expression becomes serious. I've heard that criticism. And Host 2 asks, and I think sometimes people use labels instead of arguments. A noticeable reaction sweeps through the audience. Host 3 immediately responds. That's a strong statement. It's an honest one, McConaughey says. If somebody disagrees with me, let's talk about the disagreement. Let's discuss the idea. But too often we jump straight to assigning motives. Host 1 interjects. But motives matter. Sometimes, McConaughey agrees. But assuming motives can be dangerous too. The audience begins clapping again. Host 2 folds her arms. You make it sound like society has become incapable of having difficult conversations. McConaughey laughs softly. No, I think we're very capable of having difficult conversations. He pauses. I think we're becoming less capable of having uncomfortable ones. The audience erupts into applause. Even a few people who had remained silent until now join in. Host 3 raises an eyebrow. What's the difference? A difficult conversation is one where two people disagree. McConaughey explains. An uncomfortable conversation is one where both people might discover they're wrong about something. The audience reaction is immediate. Several people stand briefly to clap before sitting back down. Host 1 looks toward the crowd. Okay, clearly that connected with some people. McConaughey smiles. Maybe because everyone knows what it feels like. Host 2 isn't ready to let the point go. But let's talk specifically about public figures. Do celebrities have a responsibility to avoid controversial opinions? McConaughey takes a moment before answering. No, the answer is direct. The audience reacts instantly. Some clap, others groan. Host 2 leans forward. No responsibility at all? I didn't say that, McConaughey replies. I think public figures have a responsibility to be thoughtful. But thoughtful doesn't mean silent. The crowd applauds again. Host 3 shakes her head. But words have consequences. Absolutely. McConaughey nods. And so does silence. For a moment, nobody speaks. The audience is completely quiet. Even the host seems surprised by how quickly the conversation has escalated. Host 1 glances toward the producers off camera and then back at the table. Well, we're certainly having a conversation this morning. The audience laughs, but the tension remains. Host 2 looks directly at McConaughey. Do you think some people in media intentionally create outrage because it attracts attention? The room instantly becomes silent. McConaughey leans back in his chair. The smile disappears from his face. For the first time during the interview, he looks genuinely frustrated. He slowly looks across the table at all 3 hosts. Then he says, "I think some people profit from keeping everyone angry." The audience gasps. Several people begin clapping immediately. Others look shocked. Host 3 quickly interrupts. "Are you talking about politicians?" McConaughey keeps his eyes fixed on the table. "I'm talking about anyone who benefits when people stop listening to each other." The audience erupts into loud applause. Host 2 opens her mouth to respond. But before she can, another host jumps in. "Wait a second, Matthew. Are you including the media in that criticism?" The audience suddenly becomes very quiet. McConaughey looks up. The tension is now higher than at any point in the interview. And for the first time all morning, it feels like nobody knows exactly what he's about to say next. The audience remains unusually quiet as the question hangs in the air. "Wait a second, Matthew. Are you including the media in that criticism?" For a moment, McConaughey doesn't answer. He looks from one host to the next, almost as if he's deciding how honest he wants to be. Finally, he nods. "Yes," he says calmly. The reaction is immediate. A few gasps, a few scatter claps. Several audience members lean forward in their seats. Host 2 quickly jumps in. "So you think the media is responsible for keeping people angry?" McConaughey raises a hand slightly. "No, that's not what I said." "Then what are you saying?" Host 2 asks. "I'm saying that every institution has incentives. Politics does. Hollywood does. Social media does. And yes, media does too." The audience murmurs. Host 3 leans in. "And what exactly is the media's incentive?" McConaughey doesn't hesitate. "Attention." The crowd reacts again. Host 1 tries to keep things balanced. But attention isn't automatically a bad thing. People need information. "Absolutely," McConaughey agrees. "Information matters. Journalism matters. Accountability matters. But let's not pretend attention isn't part of the business model." A few audience members applaud. Host 2 crosses her arms. "You realize some people watching at home are going to hear that and think you're attacking journalists." McConaughey shakes his head. "No, I'm attacking the idea that any institution should be beyond criticism." The audience claps louder. Host 3 responds immediately. "But criticism works both ways. You criticize public reactions, Hollywood, social media, and now media organizations. Are you willing to accept criticism yourself?" McConaughey smiles slightly. "Of course." "Really?" she asks. "Every day." The audience laughs. Host 3 continues. "Then what criticism of yourself do you think is fair?" The question catches everyone's attention. Even the audience becomes completely silent. McConaughey thinks for a moment. "I think sometimes I can be too optimistic." The host looks surprised. Host 1 laughs. "That's your biggest flaw." The audience laughs with her. McConaughey smiles. "No, I've got plenty of flaws. But optimism can become a problem when it causes you to underestimate how difficult certain problems really are." Host 2 nods. "That's actually a fair answer." For the first time in several minutes, the tension eases slightly, but it doesn't last long. Host 2 turns the conversation back. "You've said society spends too much time judging people. But aren't public figures supposed to be held accountable?" "Accountability is important," McConaughey says. "Judgment and accountability aren't the same thing." Host 3 immediately responds. "Explain the difference." Accountability asks, "What happened?" He pauses. Judgment asks, "What kind of person are you forever?" The audience reacts with loud applause. Host 1 looks impressed. "Okay, that's an interesting distinction." McConaughey nods. "People make mistakes. Some mistakes are serious. Some deserve consequences. but we become very comfortable reducing human beings to their worst moment. The audience claps again. Host 2 looks thoughtful. But some viewers would say that's easy to say when you're successful. The room grows quieter. McConaughey nods slowly. Maybe. Then he continues. But success doesn't protect you from public judgment. It often amplifies it. Several audience members applaud. Host 3 isn't backing down. Do you think celebrities complain too much about criticism? The audience laughs. Even McConaughey laughs. Yes. The crowd erupts with laughter and applause. Host 1 smiles. Well, that's probably the most popular thing you've said all morning. McConaughey grins. Look, criticism comes with the territory. If you're in public life, people are going to have opinions. That's normal. Then what's the problem? Host 2 asks. The problem is when disagreement becomes dehumanization. The audience immediately reacts. Host 3 follows up. And you think that's happened more often? I do. Why? McConaughey leans forward. For the first time, his voice becomes noticeably more intense. Because outrage is easy. The audience falls silent. It's easy to dislike someone you've never met. He continues. It's easy to assume the worst about somebody who thinks differently than you. Nobody interrupts. Nobody even moves. The entire studio is listening. What's hard, he says, is sitting across from someone, hearing something you strongly disagree with, and still treating them like a human being. The audience explodes into applause. Some people stand. Others cheer. The hosts wait for the reaction to settle. Host 1 finally speaks. Well, regardless of where people stand on this discussion, I think everyone can agree it's been a passionate conversation. McConaughey nods. It has. Host 2 glances toward her notes, then back at him. One final question before we go to break. The audience quiets again. You've challenged a lot of ideas today. You've challenged Hollywood, social media, public outrage, and even parts of the media. If you could leave viewers with one message right now, what would it be? McConaughey takes a deep breath. The room becomes completely silent. Every camera in the studio is focused on him. And judging by the expressions around the table, everyone knows his answer could either calm the conversation down or make the debate even bigger. McConaughey takes a deep breath. The studio is completely silent. Even the audience members who had been applauding moments earlier are now waiting to hear what he says next. Host 2 repeats the question. If you could leave viewers with one message right now, what would it be? McConaughey looks around the table before answering. I think we've forgotten that disagreement isn't the same thing as disrespect. The audience immediately responds with applause. He continues. We keep acting like every conversation has to end with a winner and a loser. Sometimes the goal should just be understanding each other a little better. The applause grows louder. Host 1 nods. And that's what you're hoping people take away from today. Absolutely, McConaughey replies. Not that they agree with me. Not that they agree with any of us. Just that they're willing to listen before they decide. The audience gives another strong round of applause. Host 3 smiles slightly. Well, I think it's safe to say people are going to be talking about this conversation for a while. The audience laughs. McConaughey smiles. Probably. Host 1 looks toward the camera. Matthew McConaughey, everybody. The audience erupts into applause as the segment officially comes to an end. But what happened next is what turned an already tense interview into one of the most talked about television moments of the day. As the show went to commercial break, audience members could still be seen discussing the conversation among themselves. Some were nodding in agreement with McConaughey's comments. Others clearly disagreed. The debate hadn't ended. It had only moved off camera. According to several audience members who later shared their experiences online, the atmosphere inside the studio remained surprisingly intense even after filming paused. Some viewers felt McConaughey had raised important questions about modern culture and public discourse. Others believed he had oversimplified complicated issues. What nearly everyone agreed on, however, was that the discussion felt real. Within minutes of the segment airing, clips from the interview began spreading across social media platforms. One clip showing McConaughey saying, "We've forgotten that disagreement isn't the same thing as disrespect," quickly gained thousands of shares. Another clip featuring his comment about outrage being easier than understanding sparked heated debate online. Supporters praise him for speaking honestly. Critics argue that his perspective ignored important realities faced by many people. Hashtags connected to the interview began trending throughout the day. Comment sections filled with arguments. Some users called it one of the most thoughtful celebrity interviews they'd seen in years. Others accused McConaughey of avoiding direct answers to difficult questions. Media outlets soon picked up the story. Opinion writers analyzed the exchange. Entertainment websites published breakdowns of the most intense moments. Television commentators debated who had made the stronger points. Even people who hadn't watched the original interview started discussing it after seeing clips online. Back at the studio, several of the hosts reportedly addressed the segment later in the day during production discussions. Not because anyone had lost control of the conversation, but because the interview had generated exactly what live television often hopes for, an unscripted exchange that felt authentic. No shouting, no dramatic walk-offs, no personal attacks, just genuine disagreement. And in today's media environment, that alone was enough to capture attention. Later that evening, reactions continued pouring in from viewers across the country. Some praised the host for challenging McConaughey's opinions instead of simply agreeing with him. Others praised McConaughey for remaining calm under pressure and answering difficult questions directly. What made the segment memorable wasn't that everyone agreed. It was that nobody did. The conversation exposed different viewpoints, different assumptions, and different ways of looking at the same issues. And that's why people kept talking about it long after the cameras stopped rolling. By the next morning, clips from the discussion had accumulated millions of views across multiple platforms. Articles continued appearing. Commentators continued debating. Viewers continued sharing their opinions. The interview had taken on a life of its own. And whether people agreed with Matthew McConaughey or not, one thing was clear: the conversation had struck a nerve. It reminded people how rare it has become to see real disagreement unfold without instantly turning into hostility. It reminded viewers that difficult discussions don't always have clean endings. And perhaps most importantly, it reminded everyone that sometimes the most memorable moments on television happen when nobody knows exactly what will be said next. Now we want to hear from you. Do you agree with Matthew McConaughey's perspective? Or do you think the host made stronger points during the discussion? Was this an example of healthy debate, or did the conversation miss the bigger issues? Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to Fame After Hours for more real talk show stories.